They managed to survive the hairspray, the heavy metal days of the 1980s. But as many bands fell by the wayside as they entered the 90s, these boys managed to carry on for 30 years. Not by going forward, but by going back in time to the early 1970s, to the British glam rock explosion, and forming one of the UK's best-loved glam rock bands, the Glamsters. This is their story, told for the first time in their own words.
You can look at this, but don't touch it, alright?
Look of confusion and shock. What the fuck is this?
You could see the shock in their face when we came on.
It's a bizarre story of 4 guys and 1 girl in lipstick, high heels, and spandex.
70s, for me, is an era of great fun. I mean, people don't go, ugh, 70s. They usually go, what a great time.
A story of lifelong friendships, rock anthems, loud guitars, and roaring crowds.
We've been through so much together that you can't, ever compare that to anything you've ever done in your life.
I have a lot of very, very fond memories about the Glamsters.
It became a massive part of my life.
All of us were just white as a sheet. I think I might have been vomiting on my body all night. There is one bass that you do have to have in your collection, and it happens to be the white Thunderbird. The last final bit of putting your wig on and sort of like looking around the corner and thinking these guys are just going to crucify us.
And we started to really worry. Thought we're going to die here.
But you can't just play timidly. You've got to give it large, lots of thrusting.
They're all still hungover from the night before. It was quite amusing seeing their faces. Bless them.
I grew up on the Isle of Wight, and I went to it was like a boarding school on the island. And one term, mid-year, this kid turned up. Small, skinny kid with the National Health glasses and with the plaster in the middle where he'd broken them. But Dave Ray, his name was, or is, and still to this day, he's probably my oldest friends. And he was funny, and he had an attitude on him. I mean, he'd stand up to the older kids. He wouldn't take any shit, He was funny, and he said, we kind of hit it off. And he said, I'm learning the guitar, and I said, well, it's funny that because I'm a drummer. So we got together and we started learning a couple of songs, just the two of us. And then there was another guy called Mitch Holmes. He was from Canada, and he fancied himself as a bit of a singer. So come the end of the term, there was like school sort of talent night. So we get up with our little band. Well, that's Dave on guitar, me on drums, and Mitch singing, and we played Wild Thing and a Beatles song, but I can't remember which one it was, Let It Be or something. So we did that. A massive round of applause from the entire school. We thought, wow, this is good. Of course, next day we get all this attention. thought, this is brilliant.
For some unknown reason, I hooked up with a guy in the playground, a guy called Jason Gregory.
And we met in the playground, and he said, well, I play guitar. I said, well, I'll do a bit of singing.
And we met and we kind of got talking, and he was very much into music, and it turns out he sings. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, I play a bit of guitar, and I said, do you fancy sort of coming round to my house one day?
Yeah, we got together over at his place, and he said, what do you know? I said, well, I know Prowler by Iron Maiden. He said, I know how to play that. It was probably the other way round. So we were sort of in there. I was singing into one of his antiperspirant bottles, and I remember my eyes closed, giving it large, and his mother just opened the door, and I was totally unaware. It's just brilliant. And I always remember after about 3 or 4 hours, his mum or dad would come back in, very humble man, who would say, I think that's enough now, Simon. That boy screaming his head off in my house.
And then a lot of other kids from the school, you know, who played instruments, they started saying, well, you know, can we play with you? And next thing we know, we got this little band together, a little school band. So we had one guy who sang, and another guy who was learning the bass, and I think there was a girl who played saxophone, another guy played piano. So we all got together and we started learning songs, and then by the end of the next term, we end up doing our first little gig. It was like end of term disco. And it was brilliant, we loved it, you know. So there we go, first band. And it was called Oblivion. There was, and our thinking behind that was that there was a big band out at the time called Genesis, and Genesis meant the beginning, and Oblivion meant the end. So we thought it was really cool. And we made a backdrop that we used to hang up behind the drums, got Oblivion written on it. And we played gigs, and then we started to venture out of the school, and we played the youth club in the village, and that was the first time we'd played in front of an audience that didn't know us, and that was quite interesting. That was good. And we went down well, and this went on for a couple of years. We'd end up, you know, playing the school summer fete. We'd play the school disco. We'd play some other schools. We'd play the old youth club, and you know, we loved it. We were having a whale of a time.
Because I think our musical journey really started at the same time, because we learnt what we know now really together. So I think we sort of grew up together musically, so to a point where we'd be finishing each other's lines or saying, oh, I know where we can go from here, that middle eight or that bridge, that's a brilliant idea, or I was thinking the same. So you'd end up with such a catalogue of material and in such a short time, and it was just because we were just bubbling at that time.
One of the first things we ever did was actually get a band together with some people we knew, and the band became out to lunch.
And in a very short time, we we're getting some really good support slots, sort of playing with the support band. If bands like La Host and Trilogy were going out supporting them brilliant, they'd come off that tour, and then we'd go and support them on their own tours after they'd finished with the big band sort of thing.
So fast forward a couple of years, we're like 15 now. We started to play in the pubs, 15 years old. There was a band on the island called the Mechanics. They were, you know, a lot older than us. They were in their 20s. They were a proper band. In fact, they're still going, because I went to see them about a year ago, and they're still playing, and they're still brilliant. And they used to do this thing where they'd set up all their equipment in a pub on a Sunday lunchtime and do like an open mic afternoon. So anyone could get up. You could get up and play with the Mechanics, or you could get up and do your own thing. And so we did it. So that was my first taste of playing with proper, you know, real musicians, people who did this, you know, full time, you know, and that was something. And then we'd get up and we'd play our little thing, and it was brilliant. We were having a fantastic time. And then, sort of towards the end of our time at school, there was this big band on the Isle of Wight. They were probably the biggest band on the island. Last Straw, their name was. And they were a lot older than us. They were kind of in their late 20s, and they were, you know, proper band. They had a road crew, they had a tour bus, they had a big PA system, they had lighting, they used pyros, they put on big shows. They very rarely played on the island. They would mainly go off on tour and play, you know, on the mainland or on the continent or wherever they would play. But occasionally they'd do a home gig on the island, and it was a big show usually. Anyway, they kind of got to know of us through playing in these little silly gigs in the pubs, and we get a call one day saying, would you like to come and support Last Straw? We're doing a big show on the theatre at the end of the Shanklin Pier, and we're looking for some support bands. Would you like to come and open up for us and do like half an hour set? And we thought, wow, oh my God, we're getting to play on a big stage and open up for Last Straw. So we carted all our gear to the end of the pier. Pier's not there now, it all blew down in the big storm in the 80s, but at the end of the pier there was a massive, you know, old sort of theatre that had a circle and seats, and it was where they used to hold all the, you know, the summer season spectaculars, but Last Straw had it for one night. And we get in there, and this place fills up with bikers and Hell's Angels and weird looking people, and we thought, wow, this is amazing. And we got up, we shit ourselves, but we got up, we did our half-hour set, we come off, you know, they respectfully applauded, you know, all these bikers. And then there was another band that came on after us. They were a bit older than us, and they were good. And then we sat back, and then Last Straw came on. Whoa, we thought, fuck, this is the music business, this is what it's all about. And that was it from then on. That was all, you know, that was, my mind was made up. I wanted to be a drummer and I wanted to do this. So went back, came to the end of the school year, we're all about to leave school, and Danger Man Dave, the guy I'd started playing with all those years ago, got expelled. He got expelled for indecent exposure. He mooned at a police officer out the back of the school coach. Anyway, all went horribly wrong. He got expelled. So we did our final gig at the school summer fete with the remaining members of the band.
Thank you.
And that was it. School was over. Being a boarding school, you know, it was only me and another guy, Tim, who lived on the Isle of Wight. At the end of the summer, everyone went their separate ways back to wherever they lived in the world. And that was the end of that.
Out to Lunch became a kind of an organic band, I suppose. Jason on vocals, myself on guitar. We hooked up with a guy called Mark Fernie, who was a good bass player. A guy called James Ware, who was a very, very talented keyboard player, classically trained. And a drummer who we bumped into locally in Windsor, a guy called Brian Balderson, who's actually Icelandic. Great drummer. And we just kind of all got together really, just hit it off. And we had no real preconceptions about any kind of style of music. And at that point, we were all kind of rehearsing in the Windsor Youth Club, which is based in the church in Windsor.
You're still learning your craft at that point, and I just have so many fond memories of kids, all your school friends, all your college mates and all. And I think, you know, really, if we're all honest about it, the reason we start playing in a band is probably for girls, isn't it, really?
And actually we weren't doing covers, we started kind of writing our own music, and it was just a really weird thing that the music style that we were kind of churning out was almost quite progressive.
Or more girls, in fact, I think probably is more to the truth.
I remember the very first gig we did, actually, proper gig. It was at Windsor Boys School, and we got asked to play on the final day of term. And I remember we did 2 songs, and they were both covers actually. One was California Dreaming by Mums and Papas, which I'd always loved, and we did Free Bird by Lynyrd Skynyrd. Bearing in mind we only had a limited period of time, and Mr. Guitarist here, of course, Lynyrd Skynyrd, that's it, opened up the floodgates, and I'm kind of away with the solo at the end, and you know, I kind of didn't want it to end. And we were playing in front of 800 people in the school on a big stage, and it was great. And that was kind of the first sort of real feeling of playing it to a live audience with that kind of, that band.
So, I suppose you forward on a year, and about 17 years old then, not really doing much in the way of playing. And Tim phones me up and he said, "Yeah, guess what, Last Straw have split up." I go, "What do you mean Last Straw have split up? They're the biggest band on the island. How can they split up?" He said, "Yeah, Steve phoned me out." Steve was one of the guitarists in Last Straw. He said, "You know, the band's kind of gone a bit like that. We're looking for a drummer, we're looking for a bass player, and we're looking for a keyboard player. And would you like to come and try out for the band?" Yes. So, oh, hello. So we did. And we ended up in this barn in a farm rehearsing all their songs. They weren't a covers band, they did all their own material. So that was a big learning curve, because it was the first time they said, "No, you don't play it like that, it has to be played like this." And I had to listen to all their old tapes and a few of their records that they'd had released and learn what the previous drummer had done, and that's how I had to play it. So that was interesting. So then, next thing we know, I'm 17 years old, I'm in Last Straw. They said, "Right, we're going to do our first show." So that was at the Pavilion in Ryde, again a big kind of theatre, big stage, light rig, road crew, the tour buses outside, proper tour bus, you know, bright yellow it was, it had bunk beds on the back, it had a bar in it, it had a lounge area, you know, that was it. I was a rock star, I couldn't believe it, you know. This place filled up again with all the bikers, the Hells Angels, all the weirdos, all the, you know, all the hardened rock fans. Get out on the stage, you know, we had pyros, you know, thunder flashes. I mean, it was a proper show, and I just couldn't believe what had happened to me. I thought I was in the Rolling Stones. That was it. That was it. A year ago, I was a kid in a school band playing school discos, and then all of a sudden here I am on this big stage playing with this incredible band and part of it. So, you know, that was great. So we're into the early 80s then, you know. Music scene had changed. I mean, Last Straw had been doing their thing, God, I don't know, 10, 15 years by then. They were a very sort of hippie, psychedelic, sort of 70s band, you know, a bit like Pink Floyd, a bit psychedelic. You know, the music scene had changed, a new romantic thing was coming in, you know, I don't know what. We played some good shows, we played some big, you know, big shows, but it wasn't, Last Straw wasn't at full throttle like they had been, you know, years before. But it was enjoyable, the shows we did do were great.
So Jason and I played in a couple of different band variations in Windsor. Windsor was quite rife with musicians, which was really nice, because actually there was always someone you bump into down the pub that was a musician. You could always go and sit and have a beer and have a chat about what they were doing. And you know, I think being at school, I remember at school there were at least 5 or 6 people who played guitar or played the drums or whatever. We found ourselves actually putting a band together, and the new wave of heavy metal was kind of quite prevalent around the sort of, 80s, and it seemed to be like Iron Maiden and Saxon and all those kind of really heavy new wave of British heavy metal bands seemed to be taking precedence, even in the charts. I mean, who'd ever thought Saxon would have a top 20 hit? Iron Maiden would have a top 20 hit. I got really turned on to that sort of music, and I think it was just the fact that it was just the power of it and the kind of the sound overall of like twin guitars kind of churning out and the drummer going mad in the background and a solid bass line, and that for me was a turning point, certainly in the music in rock terms, that I liked.
And then we met a guy called Robin Britton. Now he was the manager of the Hollies. The Hollies, big band, a lot of people will know a lot of their songs. He Ain't Heavy Is My Brother, The Air That I Breathe. Big international band they were, big in the States, big at, #1 records. He was their manager, and he was looking for new artists to do writing with and recording with. Anyway, he came to see Last Straw, and for some reason he picked Tim, the keyboard player, and myself out, and he wasn't interested in Steve and Pete, the other guys, who were a bit older, for whatever reason. And I would have been happy to go and do these recordings with the Hollies guy, and keep Last Straw going. But I mean, it all ended in tears. It didn't go well. The guys thought they were being betrayed, and that was kind of it, really. That was the end of Last Straw. Well, it was the end of that version of Last Straw. Looking back, that's a shame. So we go off, we go into the studio, we do some writing, we do some recording, and then they brought Terry Sylvester in to help us with some recording. Now, Terry Sylvester was a member of the Hollies. He was a proper rock star, and he was singing on some of the tracks. So again, there I am, sat in the drum room in the studio, laying down these tracks, and singing over there is a member of the Hollies. I couldn't believe it again,
I'll be here if you need me. Tell me where or when. I'll be here if you want me. Even as when.
18 months, 2 years ago, I was playing in the school discos in my little school band, and here I was in a recording studio, and that was a good learning curve, because it was the first time I'd done any proper recording studios in a proper studio, and you play different. The techniques of playing are completely different in a studio than what you would do live, so I learned a lot from that as well. Anyway, that kind of went on, didn't really come to much. That fizzled out, so I'm 18, almost 19 years old, got no band, sat on the Isle of Wight, and like a lot of kids who grew up on the Isle of Wight, there comes a time when you've got to, pack your little bag, your little rucksack, and get off the island and go to London to seek your fortune. So that's basically what I did.
Funny enough, we found ourselves landing what every musician's dream is, a gig of a lifetime, which was through the youth club that we were part of in Windsor.
And then we got this cracking gig at Brixton Academy. So you go from playing in a church hall to playing Brixton Academy.
So there we were, rehearsing away 2 tracks to play at Brixton Academy on this particular day in May, in whenever it was. And it was the first time I felt like, I suppose, a rock star, because we were playing in front of, you know, 1,000 or so people who were all really into it and really into the day as a whole anyway, with the bands that were there. And it was a very mixed, eclectic mix of bands. But we actually opened the show because I think they felt that we had the sort of the energy and the kind of combustion to sort of get people moving. And I remember it. We did 2 shows in one day, Brixton Academy, and in between, you know, everyone, you know, it was just like being, as I'd imagine, being signed by a record company, and we were out on tour and had people sort of like hanging around us, and it was just great fun and a really good eye opener. And so that was kind of a highlight for me, particularly around that sort of time.
So I think there was sort of 4,000 at lunchtime, the sort of premiere, you know. And in the evening there was about 5,000. I've never heard a noise like it.
Okay, this is something for all of you tonight. This is something called Young and Free. And don't you ever forget it.
Biggest stage I think in Europe, and boy did I try and use it all. Oh, I've killed myself. I was panting, running up and down, jumping over monitors, vaulting off this, that and the other through sheer adrenaline. It was just mental really. But as much good it did us, I think it also spoilt us a bit, because then you start believing what people are telling you. So, but that sort of goes on for a period of years. That people are telling you, oh, you know, you're the bee's knees. You actually start believing the write-ups, you know, in Kerrang, well, later in Kerrang, when we were obviously in metal, and say, oh, then next best band to succeed or something. So you start believing that. And when you get a manager also that tells you, right, you know, I've got a list of 45 dates, give up your daytime, and then all that turns to pot really, because you realise he was giving you a load of BS. And it never happened, and there was imminent tours of the States and stuff like that.
And of course, what's the first thing I do when I get out there? I look up my old mate Dave Ray, Danger Man, the guy I'd started my first band with. So we hooked up, hadn't seen each other for a couple of years since we left school. I told him what I'd been doing, and then I said, well, let's get a band going, you know. So we did now, and we got a band going with a guy called John Hardman. Now, John Hardman was actually Dave's stepfather, and he was a lot younger than Dave's mum. Still older than us. He was probably 10, 12 years older than us, but he was still, you know, he was cool because he was a professional musician, full-time musician. He'd been in a band in the 70s that had had some hits, and they'd played on Top of the Pops, and you know, he was like proper musician. So we started a band with him. Initially just a covers band. Thought we'll learn some covers, we'll go out, we'll have some fun, we'll play some pubs. You know, we're still playing, great. So that's what we did. And that was another learning curve, because John, being a hardened musician, you know, he'd done, as I say, he had this track record. He was also a session musician. He also had a recording studio. Hello, I mean, to us that was like so John, being the perfectionist he was, you know, he wouldn't let us go out and play these songs unless they were right. So that was a good, you know, I learned a lot there. And we went out and we played these gigs, and people started to like it, you know, and we soon got a little following. in the area. So then one day John turned around and said, do you know what we need to do? We need to make an album. We need to make an album of our own songs and release it. We thought, yes, bring it on. You know. So we did. We got a load of songs together, and we tried a few of them out in our live set, with, you know, mixed in with our covers, see what worked, see what didn't work so well, and we ended up with 10 songs.
Outside my window was where we couldn't be seen, yeah. And outside our hearts, we were king and queen. Oh, outside my window, you said you'd never be away from me, away from me. Just the same old story.
And we recorded them, and we pressed an album, and we released it, and that, as a result of that, that gained us more popularity, and, you know, more people would come and see our gigs, and it was good. And this was in the sort of what I would call West London area, sort of Windsor area, Sunningdale, you know, all that sort of suburbs. That's where we, you know, that's where we kind of lived. That's where we did our thing, and that was kind of the circuit we were on, that covering that whole sort of West London area.
When you get home.